I had the pleasure of welcoming Maceo Owens, CEO of the ERG Movement, as a guest speaker during one of Benevity's monthly ERG discussion group sessions to discuss the 3P's of ERGs. So you might be wondering, what is this discussion group? Each month, we bring together DEI professionals to discuss their most pressing ERG challenges and really just connect with their peers to share best practices and insights. If you'd like to join the group, feel free to sign up as a group member, and then you'll receive invites to future sessions and learnings from each of the monthly sessions after they take place. We at Benevity also have an ERG management software called Benevity Affinity Groups, which brings ERGs all together in one platform to really streamline management and make reporting a breeze. Links to join the discussion group and learn more about Benevity Affinity Groups can be found in the video description, and I really hope to see you at a future discussion session. But until then, please enjoy this presentation from Maceo. Our members loved it, so I'm sure you will too. I am going to pass things over to our presenter, Maceo, very quickly. And I'm going to let her introduce herself shortly, but I can't resist just an opportunity to gush a little bit first. So I've had the opportunity to get to know Maceo over the past few months. I'm personally really excited for this session. Maceo not only has experience, really owning and kind of managing ERG programs for companies like Kayak, DoorDash, and OpenTable, but she's just so knowledgeable and really passionate about helping others succeed in the world of ERGs. But she's also pretty amazingly founded her own company, the ERG Movement, as a way to really help connect and educate amazing people such as yourselves who are working with ERGs at their organizations. So really excited that she can be here with us today. And for those of you who are planning on attending Benevity Live this year, you'll also be able to catch Maceo on the main stage. So without further ado, I'm going to pass the reins over to Maceo for a presentation on how you can all set your ERGs up for success this year. And then we'll roll into a live Q&A so that you all have the chance to kind of ask Maceo your most burning questions. So feel free to drop those into the chat after. And yeah, without further ado, Maceo, I will stop sharing and pass things over to you.
Awesome. I'm so excited for today's session. And I promise you, even though I cannot see you, we are still going to have a nice interactive session. So make sure that you have your keyboards handy, I guess, if that makes but I am really excited to speak today. For those of you who don't know me, that was honestly an intro. I'm so honored by it. It's always awkward for me introducing myself, but just some context on me. My name's Maceo, she, her pronouns, pronounced like the store Macy's with an O at the end. So you had it perfectly, Tiffany. Obviously, we go way back at this point. And I go by the ERG Homegirl. Like, that's how about ERGs I am. You literally see my sign in the back. I'm an ERG super fan. But context on how I got there: I was an ERG leader. I eventually became an ERG program manager. I have managed multiple programs at once, and now with the ERG movement, I am really just focused on helping to set ERG leaders and ERG program managers up for success. So that is like my sole goal right now. Context behind it: I've been featured in Forbes for my work with ERGs. The ERG, can you hear me? I think that you all can hear me. Like I
Yeah,
said,
we
keep
can
your
hear you,
people.
Maceo.
Okay, cool. I've been featured in Forbes for my work. I have an ERG leader community called ERG Champs. And also I have just a ton of really cool resources for ERG leaders, like the ERG Idea Hub. It has over 6 examples of real world ERG programming across companies, across industries. That's a free tool, just things like that I try to provide for the ERG space. So if you're not familiar, just a little bit of context behind it. But also, I want to say my approach with ERGs is very different from most people's. I approach ERGs in the very same way as running a business. And those business development principles have really set me up in a very different manner than I think a lot of other like ERG programs that I see. And I see them a lot. For context, over the past couple of years, if I had to count, it would be well over 500 one-on-one Zoom calls that I've had with people across the space. Even I saw some people on this webinar who I've spoken with before, so shouts out to you. But just know I speak to a lot of people around in the ERG world, and I kind of have a good feel for what those pain points are. And with today's presentation, we're going to talk about how to use those business development principles to help set you up for success. Now, like I said, it's going to be interactive. Thing one that I want to know is like, who's in the virtual room with us? So if you're an ERG leader, put a 1. If you're a program manager of an ERG, put a 2. If you're like a D&I leader, executive or HR executive, put a 3. And if you fall into the other bucket, which is cool, put a 4. I just want to see who we have. Makes sense that there's a lot of 2s and 3s. Just know if you're a 2 and a 3, I understand the lift of being both. And I will kind of give some context into there. Okay, we have a pretty good range. Well, I'm excited. We have some variety. If you've been in the space for a while, you will get some new tips. And if you're just learning about ERGs, then this is also a place to learn as well. Okay, so to jump into it, like I mentioned, I approach ERGs with a business mindset, and with that, one of the things that I have is the ERG movement principles. And with these principles, essentially, if you keep in mind just the basics of them, this will be one thing to help set your ERG program up for success. The first principle that I would like to bestow upon you all is that an ERG program must operate like a business enterprise. And I know that this is like, what does this even mean? Where do I start with? Couple of things to really focus on here. First part is the ERG program piece. I actually put a post up today that's kind of talking about this, but a lot of ERGs operate on an individual basis because they were probably stood up very grassroots. Every ERG just kind of does its own thing. Even then in the space, I hear a lot the term like the wild, wild west when we refer to ERGs, just to say that they're really doing their own thing. Just know having the ERGs operate together as a program is essential and part of getting your program on track for success. So that's thing one. Also with it, it's also stating what I've already said before, operate your ERG program as a business. What that means, we'll get into it, but that's principle number 1. Principle number 2, an ERG program must benefit both its members and the company that it operates within. I can go on a whole rant about my personal feelings on differentiating ERGs versus BRGs. I won't do it right now. But if you know me well enough, you know that that's a conversation I love to have. With that, the reason I bring that up is because sometimes we feel like an ERG program can just solely serve one of these two purposes, just benefiting the members or just benefiting the business, when really every ERG, Employee Resource Group program, has to benefit both its members and the business. Now, that being said, the members piece is very important and is first and foremost there for a reason, because if your ERG program, even whatever you call it, I recently did a study and saw that there's over 60 different names for the different things that people call their ERG program, by the way. Side note. But with that, whatever you call your ERG program, if you're doing business benefit things, so trying to benefit the business with your program and completely don't have a good member experience at all, you're essentially just like a diversity committee. So that's why it's so important that you actually make sure that members are getting something from the program. On the other hand, you also want to make sure that you're delivering on what the business wants, because ultimately that is who is sponsoring these programs. So you have to know what the business wants in order to deliver on it. We also double back on that also in a second, but that's principle number 2. Principle number 3, an ERG program have a strong foundation or it will fail. And this sounds dramatic. I promise it's not. Unfortunately, a lot of ERG programs are on the slow decline, failing, or if not failing, we'll at least say like flailing right now. Like just think about maybe when you were first learning how to swim, if you know how to swim, or even just like getting in the water if you don't know how to swim. Even for a second, you might feel comfortable, but as you start getting nervous, like you just start flailing around. And that's kind of where ERGs are right now, where a lot of them, they're not in this place where they're set up for long-term success. So things are just very sporadic. Again, that wild, wild west terminology. You don't have to call yourself out in the chat if you've seen it, if you might be part of that right now and you see it in your current company. But like I said, I see it a lot in the space. So that being said, even after having these conversations, the 2 major problems that I see within the ERG space has really boiled down to these 2 things. ERG leaders are burnt out and ERG engagement is low. If I had to put everything in a bucket of what the 2 problems are that ERGs are experiencing around, it's these 2. Just put a me in the chat if it's either of these things. You don't have to say what it is. You don't have to, like I said, call yourself out, but put a me in the chat so people know that they're not alone if they're experiencing this right now. Okay, we have some people. So we know, again, we're not alone as we have this conversation. Like I said earlier, I'm the ERG homegirl, so I will tell it to you straight. And it's going to be a little painful as we have it, but just know I say it all with love. And by applying what we're about to speak about, it's actually really going to help transform your ERG program. So it doesn't have to be like this forever. Now, I said an ERG program principle number 3 is an ERG program has to have a strong foundation or it will fail. So what does that mean? What does it mean to have a strong foundation? That is where the 3P's of ERGs comes into place. Now, some context behind this. This is the exact framework that I've used, by the way, to give ERG programs a strong foundation to help turn them around in less than a quarter. So that's why I'm telling you all, using these principles here is going to be a game changer for your ERG program. Context behind them, though. Let's start with this. Does anyone know any of these shows? If you do, put in the chat which one is your favorite of the 3. And for context, for those of you who don't know either of these shows, they're essentially the same exact show, just like with a different format. So basically the hosts here, they will go in and they will meet up with like a business that is struggling in some capacity. And they're really working to help turn their business around. And by the end of the show, the people, all cringe but binge worthy. I hear you. It is cringe because oftentimes you're watching these business owners who are dealing with the problem. An expert is coming in and they're telling them, hey, I know this business so well that if you follow what I'm trying to tell you, your business will change. The people that listen, they actually have a huge difference in how their business is going. They end the show and everyone's happy. The problems, the pain points that they're experiencing are likely gone. Just things are a complete turnaround. And for those of you who don't, and for those that don't listen, I should say, on the show, at the end, they'll typically be just as frustrated. I don't know about you all, but me personally, I like looking them up at the end of the show and being like, are they still even in business? Because they didn't listen to like the basic things that this expert was trying to tell them. So when it comes to these types of shows, actually, me personally, my favorite one of them all is actually called The Profit. Very similar. My favorite entrepreneur, Marcus Lemonis, he goes into businesses and very similarly, he identifies like a struggling business. And actually they'll reach out to him. He'll go in and he'll give them some tips, some basic principles that if you apply this, you're going to be able to completely change your business. And it doesn't even matter what industry. Some people, they feel like, oh, well, my business is different. I know it better. But regardless of the fact, people who apply the things that he says, their business experiences a completely different. It's just so much better, basically. Cool. We have some people who watch The Profit. I can binge watch the show. And honestly, as homework, I really recommend for you all to watch just one episode. And after we have this presentation, you'll be able to see the ties with what we say. With the show in particular, there's 3 things that he's always bringing up. The 3 P's of business: people, process, and product. These 3 P's are essential, and this is kind of what's going to frame the rest of our conversation. There's 3 P's to ERGs, but really to show you all the 3 P's of business, and you can look this up. This is a business principle, not just Marcus. He didn't make it up, but even then he just uses it as the framework, the go-to for any business problem that's like, if there's a big business problem that's happening, it's through these 3 P's. So people, do we have a team of people who are aligned with what this business is? Process, do these people who work for this company have a clear role and understand how to do their role? And product, is there a problem with the quality of the output of our business? Even then, the 3 P's is so universal that you start to see it actually in other aspects of life. Anyone in here, put I don't know, 7 in the chat if you've ever heard of Keith Lee on TikTok. Okay, cool. We see some people. Now, for those of you who haven't, just know he's like a food reviewer. And oftentimes he'll go to businesses and he'll rate them based on their food. Sometimes people will even reach out to him for businesses that are struggling. And those are the businesses that he'll frequent. I want you all to watch this very quick clip. I just want you all to watch this clip and see if you're able to pick up on the 3 P's in it. It's only about 30 seconds. And of course, when I shared my screen, I did not do it with sound. So give me one quick second and let me do it with sound this time. And hopefully, let's see, give me like 2 seconds because I just now thought about this. Gonna change, it wants me to change. Hopefully you all will be able to hear it. Let me know if not.
Me and my family were driving around Atlanta looking for places to eat when I received this email. You can pause.
quick pause. Like you can hear? Okay, cool. All right, I'm gonna restart it. I just wanted to double check if you could hear. With that, if you just, I'll say he speaks quickly. So if you don't already have your captions on, you can click show captions below. Otherwise, you might miss it. All right. So we're listening out for how the 3Ps show up.
Me and my family were driving around Atlanta looking for places to eat when I received this email. You can pause to read if you would like to. I got it. Let's try it and rate it 1 through 10. I spent $60. The name of this place is the Dining Experience. It's about 30 minutes from downtown Atlanta. When you put up, it was completely empty. From the parking lot to the actual restaurant itself, nobody. Now I want to know, is it the customer service, is it the food, or is it the lack of marketing?
Okay. I will say that was quick. And honestly, I kind of gave it away a little bit with how the 3Ps came up because I ended it right when he said it. At the end of the clip, he says, was it the marketing, was it the customer service, or the food? This is the 3Ps, but just with a different name. So really to kind of make it clear for you all. In this case, it would be, and let me see if get my clicker working again. Okay. For the marketing, do we have a group of people who are aligned with what this business is and how to talk about it, how to promote it? That would be the people. The process, is the staff able to deliver on an excellent customer experience over and over consistently? That's what a process does. Or is it the product, the output of the business in this case? Is it the food, basically, that he's saying? That's the problem. Now, all this business talk, I will loop it around ERGs. Again, I'm just trying to show you how universal this is. But with ERGs in my brain, like one day I might be like the Keith Lee of ERGs. I don't know, some version of that in my made up universe. But with that same exact concept, when we're talking about the 3Ps, I've just changed a couple of the words with it. So instead of people, think about purpose. Instead of, actually, process remains the same. If you need to interchange the P, it could also be playbook, but I think I like process. And then instead of product, the product of an ERG program is the ERG program's programming. Don't worry, we're going to break each of these down. Starting first with purpose. Starting first with purpose. Really, this purpose piece is so important, and most ERGs don't have alignment on what their ERG program is. And also, importantly, what their ERG program is not. Honestly, because of the way that most ERG programs are set up, where they probably fall under the D&I team, they really are positioned as an extension of the D&I team, but typically as the business, like the business doesn't just want it being an extension of the D&I team. They want it as an intersection of D&I, employee engagement, and learning and development. And honestly, that's what ERGs are anyway. But if we've never asked our executives, what do you want from this program? What does success look like from this program? Or even, I love asking chief financial officers, what are the metrics that you need to see that actually make this program worth it? Sometimes we are honestly even too scared to ask those questions because we don't want to be told certain answers. So for instance, for some ERG leaders, like I've seen ERGs where one of the ERG leaders is saying, I'm part of this ERG because I want to make the marketing team, like I want to make sure that they represent my community better and they're more inclusive with that. And another ERG leader on the same team will say, well, I want to help this business to champion policy that really is more inclusive to my community. Meanwhile, the business actually wanted the ERG leaders to do none of that. They only wanted the ERG leaders to help make sure that their community feels like they belong at the company. And honestly, I will just tell you, I'm seeing this more and more at companies where they're not necessarily looking for the ERGs to be, again, that extension of D&I where it's specifically championing diversity efforts. They're leaving that to the D&I team. And instead, they're just saying, hey, I want you all to do niche programming that makes sure that people feel like if they have not been represented in any of the general employee engagement things that we do, the general learning and development initiatives that we have, that they feel, if nowhere else, that within these spaces, they have a space where they belong. Again, most of us have never had the conversation of what the ERG program is and is not. These are some questions that are essential to ask to really understand what success is. Now, giving more context with that, what do you do with that statement? And honestly, this is where I'm specifically talking to you all who put a 2, or those of you who put 2 and 3 in the chat as well. I even saw some like 1, 2, and 3. So shouts out to you all for sure. But for those of you who are over the ERG program, it is essentially your responsibility to have these questions answered for the program. Again, principle number one of the ERG movement was that the ERG program has to operate as a program. So we have to be in unison, which means we have to have a shared goal and understanding of what this program is and what it is not. When having these conversations, so again, I told you speak to your executives, but even beyond that, you also do want to speak to your ERG leaders, the members of the ERG, to understand what they would want from it, because it has to benefit both the members and the business as well. So with that, as you're having these conversations with the executives and the ERG leaders and members, it's your responsibility as the expert who's kind of put over this to level set with them. So from the executives, they may have an understanding that this program is something that is actually not set up to be, because they don't know. But if you just roll with it, like, it's your job to actually level set with them. Actually, that's probably not going to work, and have those conversations. Same thing with the ERG leaders. Sometimes you have to level set and say, look, I know that you really wanted to drive policy like external in the world. That's not really what this program is. When you have that alignment, yes, those conversations can be tough. They're not the funnest thing to have, but it helps get everyone on the same page versus the ERG leaders spending hours trying to champion this new thing that's never, ever going to be brought to life. So purpose is extremely important. How do you do this? What does it look like to bring this to life? With that, I would say you start off with that listening tour that we talked about. Talk to all the parties in terms of like what they want. Bring it together into a vision, your vision statement, your programmatic vision statement, saying again what this program is, and also clearly saying this is what this program is not. From there, you want to create a strategy, a step, oh, not there yet. From there, you want to create a strategy, a step-by-step plan of where this program is now versus where you want it to be. So again, that vision statement, and working backwards year by year on how you're going to get there, because this is not a quick process. And that's right on brand with the question that was just put in the chat. This is a multi-year thing getting there. Don't worry, I'm going to give you a tool that'll help you to bake that out. And then from there, after you have the strategy, like I just mentioned, you want to make sure that the strategy has the timeline. Don't worry, we're going to get to it, I promise. Oh, how long is this call supposed to be? I thought you said, how long is this all supposed to be? Call's an hour, but this presentation, it's almost done, believe it or not. Lots of information in a little bit of time. So with that piece, one thing, and actually this definition of burnout is something that really resonates with me. Burnout happens when there's a lack of clarity, plus a lot of ask. There's a high demand, a heavy workload, if you will. The purpose piece really focuses on the low clarity portion of it all. And that's why the things that you can do to help to rectify low clarity would be giving a purpose, an end goal. Where do we want this program to be? Giving a clear strategy on how you get to that point, and that making sure that that strategy includes a timeline. This way, ERG leaders, they will feel like they're marching towards progress, not like they're on a hamster wheel, essentially going nowhere with the program, always encountering the same problems. There's no forward progression. That strategy makes a huge difference, and honestly, it'll help to get a lot of buy-in from ERG leaders as you implement some of the changes. So again, what it looks like to understand what the purpose is, a listening tour, vision for the program, strategy, and getting feedback from everyone is really helpful for those of you who already have an ERG program and kind of need to double back to fix some things, because you want to make sure that people feel looped into this process. Okay, so that is it for purpose. Part 2 is process. With process, if you follow me on LinkedIn, I talk about it a lot. SOPs, standard operating procedures. So making sure that everyone knows, thing one, making sure that every ERG follows the same governance structure. We're not doing the wild, wild west anymore, where every ERG is able to do its own thing. I understand that got most ERG programs to a certain place, but also that place right now is, like we talked about earlier, all of you said me in the chat, burnout and low engagement. Having processes is essential in how you can have a sustainable program, one that is set up for long-term success. So like I said, a clear governance structure is part 1. Part 2 of that is also understanding for each of those roles that exist, having a step-by-step for how to do those roles. It is not enough just to do a job description like post for the role and assume that the ERG leaders should be able to take it and run with it. That is not enough, especially for program managers, people who are over ERG program. It's your responsibility to make sure that the ERG leaders know how to do their role. For instance, if you were to go volunteer, let's just say like at a homeless shelter, and you volunteer to be like a server for the day, thing one, if you're doing way more than serving, if you're sweeping, if you're changing the lights, you're doing all these roles, that's one of the examples of like the burnout piece. You're doing everything. But even then, if you're serving and then they're like, you're not doing that right, and there's a way to do it, but they never actually gave you instructions to do it, it's gonna change how you view that volunteer opportunity, even though it's still doing good in the long run. Having processes, a lot of people are like, this is gonna burn out our leaders, but no, your leaders, your ERG leaders want processes. Oftentimes the pushback is just about, are these things actually going to help us in the long run? So there's just some trust building that needs to be done there. But having that clear documentation is a game changer. If I had to kind of speed through an approach on how to do this, I'm going to show you the framework we're all familiar with: who, what, when, where, why, and how. So with that, we can kind of keep that in mind. So for the who, again, we want to understand what are the ERG roles that should exist across all ERGs, no exceptions, and also the stakeholders that the ERG should work with. Ideally, this starts off very basic, so probably like the communications team, the internal comms team, like that's something that probably every ERG is going to work with, maybe design team, but really outlining for them, what does it look like to work with each of these teams? So that's the what, again, bullet pointing. What are some tasks that come with this role or being a stakeholder in this way? For when, sorry, the writing on the screen just threw me off for a second. I might know how to take it off. I'll try to do it simultaneously. But for the when, that is the frequency. Again, an ERG leader, if you just say, do an event, they might feel like, oh, well, I did one event per year, I'm good. But then you're frustrated because you're like, well, I want you to do more events than that. I want you to do monthly events or quarterly events. But if you never said that, they won't know. So frequency of events is also important, and how frequent you want them to do whatever task, not just events. Where, for the actually, yeah, we'll just touch on where. So for where, this is about where are you hosting like all of these SOPs. Leaving it in just a document is not enough. You can't get lazy once you get to the end of it and just leave it in a document. I like to, even if we call it a living document, if it's just a document, I guarantee it's dead. And no one's going to want to scroll through 40 pages of information. So just making it really easy for people to navigate. You can use tools that you already have access to like put it in a SharePoint site or in an intranet page site or whatever tools that you use that ERG leaders can easily navigate through it. The why piece is like, why is this role important? What's the benefits of it? How is this contributing to our overall vision? So making it clear, well, we're asking you to do this many events because it's going to actually contribute to your member engagement score, which means that your members are more involved. So really having that context on the importance of it. And then the how is the step-by-step for each task. That is the breakdown, the actual SOP portion that's saying, we're not just asking you to do an event, but here's how you do an event. We're not just saying even the basic of here's how to do an event, but let's just say, for instance, if you want to do an event that's in office, what does that look like? A step-by-step process versus if you want to do an event virtually, what does that look like? Or communications, how should you post? What types of things should you post and what types of things should you not post? That just goes on and on. Finance, what does it actually look like to submit an expense? Like just the most basic of things. Because if right now all the processes live in your head, they don't actually exist. It's just an expectation that you've made up and you've never actually documented it. So it has to be documented. Okay. For that basically wraps up the process piece. Like we said, burnout is a mixture of low clarity plus high demand. So the thing to know, this is more so on the high demand space. How do we make sure that we're lowering the lift on our ERG leaders, essentially? Okay, I was able to get the writing off the screen. So cool, happy with that. All right, so again, this is the other part of decreasing burnout, is actually decreasing the demand, the lift, the workload for our ERG leaders. Okay, We kind of just touched on this, but really quickly. So what does it look like to implement processes? We want to outline what are the basic responsibilities that are included in this role. Ask our ERG leaders, does this cover everything that is part of your role, or am I missing anything? What are the specific pain points that exist here, the things that give you a frustration when you go to do it every month that I can make simpler? You want to really learn about the platforms that you already have access to, especially like, for instance, even using Benevity. If you're a Benevity customer, have you actually gotten the most out of that platform? Another one could be Slack or something, even Zoom. A lot of ERG leaders don't really know all the tools that exist with Zoom. So really, you ideally as a program manager, becoming the expert in them and kind of giving your ERG leaders some tips on how to best leverage them. Make sure that you have everything documented. And then again, don't let it just live or die essentially in a document. You want to take it to the next level, make it interactive and easy to navigate. And with the last portion, programming, again, this is talking about the output of our ERG program. So that would basically come down to like the events, the communications, the initiatives that our ERG program does. Here's the funny thing. We talked about the 3P's, purpose, process, programming. Most companies, the reason why they're experiencing ERG leader burnout is because they skip those first two. These are intentionally in order. So you don't have clarity on what your program, why your program exists and what it's supposed to be. You don't have clarity on how it's supposed to run. You're only saying, hey, we have ERG leaders, go do an event, go post something. And that's not enough. And again, that's why the burnout piece is there, is because oftentimes those 2Ps are missing. With the programming, though, it is still important. Again, this is the output of our ERG program. If you're in this place where you're feeling that burnout, you're probably here. Now, if you've never seen this graphic, I think I have it pictured a few different ways, but this is the ERG movement model. This is just one of the examples of how it could look, but it's in this exact format, though. Just know if you go on the site, there's other resources on like that really break this down and a full explanation of it. But with this, if you are dealing with that burnout that we talked about, if you don't have those first 2Ps, you're in this early adolescence phase. Infancy is basically what happens before you launch an ERG program, but this early adolescence phase is what happens like right after you launch it. And with that, you can never move on to mid-adolescence, because that's really focused on how do we measure the success of our SOPs? How do we measure member engagement? If you don't have those first 2Ps in place, you're not in a place to actually measure the success because you don't have them. So, and you don't have clarity on what your program is. I'm not going to go into this in full right now, but just know, like I said, there's way more information about the ERG movement model, but you will forever be in that early adolescence phase unless we do things differently to get a different result. And if we're talking about setting our ERG program up for success long term, that means that we're trying to get our ERG program to maturity, not to forever live in this early adolescence phase. So again, that means we're going to have to go back, fix those things so that we can actually be on track to get to the next step. Now, when it comes to programming, there is still a piece there, because if low engagement is forever a thing, eventually ERG leaders will feel like the work that they're doing doesn't matter. So that's why, yes, programming is still relevant. And I do a whole like presentation on engagement, so I don't really have time to get into it right now. A ton of resources on the ERG movement, mind you. But with that, I will give you one pointer when it comes to engagement, to increasing engagement, besides the things that we already just talked about, which matter too. But if nothing else, just know that engagement happens when you deliver on your members' goals consistently. And you can read into that as much or as little as you like. I will say the more you read into it, the better, because this is the hack for increasing ERG engagement. Like I said, we won't go into it too much today, but hopefully this was helpful. Hopefully you all have some understanding now when it comes to setting your ERG program up for success. 2024 is the year where we're going to see ERG programs get on track, and I hope that you're one of them. And if you need help, I am just a call away. So make sure that you message me on LinkedIn, follow the ERG movement, and yeah, we're good, I guess, to open for questions.
Amazing. Thank you, Maceo. That was fantastic.